let's get started. And how I want to do this is I want to begin with these 7 new NFL head coaches. And I wanted to begin this way so that I could make this 2 separate videos for you guys to enjoy. So let's begin by breaking down in depth the 7 new NFL head coaches and my tier ranking for each individual. Let's start it off with Aaron Glenn of the New York Jets. Aaron Glenn, I feel, now, just to give you an idea, within these tiers, you can put the new coaches in the why him, in the inspired choice, okay? 2 categories. Obviously, you're not going to fire a new coach. Obviously, a new coach can't do better because he's never really been established, okay? And we don't know if he's good or a genius or anything like that. So when it comes to Aaron Glenn, first, let's break him down, okay? Aaron Glenn, I think his strengths as a coach are his ability to lead men. I think he is tough. I think his vision for defense, his mentality for the way and the style at which his Detroit defense performed was physical, was in your face, was aggressive, and bite kneecaps, exactly as Dan Campbell wanted, right? Aaron Glenn, a former corner in the NFL, is obviously going to have an upper hand in terms of being a player's coach because he has plenty of experience being a great player in the NFL. He was a very good player in his day. He also has experience working under successful coaches like Sean Payton and Dan Campbell, and he's been around some of the better offensive minds throughout his career as well. I think as a coach, the negatives would be I'm not convinced about him, obviously, from the offensive side of the football. I don't think that he's going to have much influence on a development of a quarterback, a development of an offense, of an offensive scheme. Those are all things that I do think are crucial to success nowadays. An offensive coordinator that can have vision, a great play caller, all that sort of things. And just the fact that he's a defensive coach does not allow him to do that. He's going to have to be fantastic on defense. And personally, I don't ever feel like he's ever led a great defense. I don't think he's ever had one season in his career where he has established himself as a great defensive play caller or a great defensive coordinator. Some people would argue that was this season for his ability to get the most out of the least, but that certainly did not show up in the playoffs. I would also say that Aaron Glenn has a tendency to be stubborn, and he has a system, man coverage, right? We're going to stop the run and load the box. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to blitz, but he does not try to persuade himself to change or switch or adapt. And that is not something I like. I am from the Patriot school of thought. I'm a Belichick guy through and through. I was basically groomed as an NFL fan through the vision of Bill Belichick. And when I think of Bill Belichick, I think of versatility. I think of game-to-game, week-to-week game planning. And I know that's something that really no coaches can really pull off. But I do like the idea of being versatile. I do like the idea of changing with your personnel and your thought of your team dependent on the players. I think that is a sign of a good coach. And to me, I have not seen that with Aaron Glenn. So personally, because I would not hire Aaron Glenn as a head coach, I put him in the why him category. I think there are things that you can get behind from a leadership standpoint, but I am very, very, very skeptical about his ability to actually be a coach at a high level against the best coaches in the NFL, especially being that he's a defensive one, and in my opinion, not one of the better defensive minds in the NFL. So I think this is not my favorite hire, for sure. Next up, we have Ben Johnson. I like how we went Detroit. So this is the other Detroit choice, of course. Ben Johnson is, in my opinion, for my money, one of the best offensive minds in football right now. And so that's a first check mark in his favor. He's an offensive-minded coach. He's a guy that has put together arguably the most well-rounded, balanced offensive attack in the NFL for the past 2 seasons. He has resurged, right? Like resurrected Jared Goff's entire career in some ways. Like the offensive line in Detroit, the talent that he's had at his disposal, certainly fantastic. But his ability to work a running game, in my opinion, with many layers to it. Like his vision for the running game, the plethora of the running game that he approaches like every week with, whether it be zone run, whether it be a power type of style of run, whether it be, just the different versatility that he can bring to the running game in terms of his play calling and design. I think that is special. I think his ability to tie together play action and the run game is special. I think his ability to find, elaborate schemes and creativity, that is special. And I do give him most of the credit when it comes to Detroit's offensive success. I think Dan Campbell does have an influence, but I feel like Ben Johnson is the creative engine that stirred the drink. And that's what I'm worried about with Detroit moving forward, to be honest. But for him, I think one of the things that I'm not in love with Ben is he doesn't have a big personality. He does kind of feel like a little bit of a geek. He does kind of lean towards more of the Josh McDaniels side of the spectrum than the Sean McVay side of the spectrum, which I'm a little bit worried about. Now, can he be a Kyle Shanahan? That will be the question. Can he get his players to be, inspired by him, and can he be a teacher at an elite level to the point where he is respected for his knowledge of the game and for his ability to be one of the best at what he does? Can he prove that, right? Because if all he's going off of is his reputation in Detroit and he can't get the players to buy into his culture or his personality or his leadership, and he can't be respected for the man, that is going to be difficult no matter how smart you are at X's and O's. Because at the end of the day, I think coaching is more so about the leadership and about setting your players up for success and their players believing in you than it is about the X's and O's. I do think it heavily does lean towards that side of the spectrum. So for Ben Johnson, he has questions to answer, but I do think this is an inspired choice because I think at the end of the day, situation aside, right? We know why he was hired. We know that he was hired before Caleb Williams. We know that he was hired to get the most out of Caleb Williams. But situation aside, whenever you can go out and you can hire one of the best offensive minds that has ran one of the best offenses in the league for the past couple of years, that is an inspired choice because you want to find a guy like that ideally, and you want to keep him as your coach. You think about the best teams in football, and you think about the most successful franchises right now in the NFL, and almost all of them are ran by offensive-minded coaches. And if they're not, they probably have a great, talented quarterback like Buffalo or the Ravens. And I think many could argue that the difference between the Chiefs' success and the Ravens and the Bills' success is the coach, being that the Bills and the Ravens don't have an offensive coach. They have defensive or special teams-driven coaches, while Andy Reid is an offensive-driven coach that is partnered with a talented quarterback. Okay? So, yes, I think this is an inspired choice for sure with Ben Johnson. I'm a fan of his offense. We'll see if he can come together as a full all-around three-phase type of coach. Okay? Next, we've got, this went back out of order. So we're going to have to find the next new coach on the list. So we have Brian Schottenheimer. Brian Schottenheimer, I'm going to go with why him just right off the bat, and then I'm going to explain why. Because I feel like a lot of people are pretty negative when it comes to Schottenheimer's hire, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it was very simple-minded. It was very, unimaginative. That's the best way to describe it. I could see Schottenheimer being a good coach. If you actually look at his resume, you look at all the places he's been, you look at the positions he's filled, he's been an offensive coordinator in 3 or 4 different locations. He's a son of an all-time great head coach in Marty Schottenheimer. He has seen multiple generations of football. He's grown up in football. And you could also get the sense of him being a pretty decent leader and actually being an all-around good coach. I could certainly see that with Schottenheimer. My problem is that it feels a lot like a Jason Garrett-like hire for, Jerry Jones. it feels like the easiest option, the safest pick. It feels like the guy that Jerry is comfortable with over the most inspired choice. And that's where I get caught up and I'm like, why him? Could we not have found somebody a bit more inspired in terms of a bit more relevant, a bit more accomplished in recent years? It feels like, yes, Schottenheimer has technically ran the Cowboys offense, but he's not been a play caller. I do wonder if he's going to be the play caller for Dallas because he used to be a play caller. A long time ago, he used to be a play caller in Seattle, in New York. He was the play caller for the Mark Sanchez Jets. That's how long this guy's been around in terms of running like an offense on his own. Okay. But, then again, this is a guy that was a son of a great coach, and he's been in the NFL for a long time. And yes, he does drive offensive, but I could see how if you could partner some good coaches around him, he could be a guy that could bring a vision together. Like, I could argue that. I can see that. But at the same time, I'm not sure that he's better than Mike McCarthy. He's certainly not as proven. He's certainly not as accomplished. So there are a lot of questions here because he has not recently been a play caller for a great offense as an offensive-driven guy. He is not a great defensive coach. He's obviously not a defensive coach. So it just feels like the comfortable choice. And that's where I'm like, why him? Okay? So that's why I have him in that category. Next up, we have Kellen Moore. So Kellen Moore, a former Dallas guy. We went to Detroit to Dallas. He was Philadelphia's offensive coordinator this past season, had a good game in the Super Bowl. When watching Kellen Moore's offenses in recent weeks and just over the course of the season, I feel like he wasn't like super imaginative, but to be fair to Kellen Moore, I feel like he didn't need to be. He had the best offensive line in the league, and he had a generational running back, and he really pressed the right buttons with that unit. When it came to Jalen Hurts, he did peak at the right time, and when it came to the Super Bowl, he gave Jalen Hurts all the answers he needed for success. That's as much as you can ask. NFC Championship and Super Bowl, the run game was a little disappointing in the Super Bowl from Kellen Moore's perspective, and Saquon didn't have the best game, but they did enough to win, and they had a game plan that worked, and they had enough play calls that sparked the offense. To me, like, Kellen Moore, he's been a solid offensive coordinator. He's been a solid play caller. I kind of wonder, he's young. I think he'll be the youngest coach in the NFL when he gets his start. I don't know if it's the look of him or what it is. He's a former quarterback. Obviously, he had to lead teams to a certain degree. He was great in college, as a quarterback. He was, very highly thought of. But maybe I'm judging a book by its cover. But to a certain degree, I don't get the aura or the presence from him that I would want from a coach. I've never really listened to much of what, Kellen Moore has said outside of just watching his offenses perform, watch how he he calls plays. I will say he's led multiple really good offenses in Dallas. He's worked with multiple quarterbacks, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, multiple styles of quarterbacks. He's had success to a certain degree in every single situation. He's been well respected. He's not just been in one location, okay? He's a former quarterback, so he'll see the game through that lens, which is always advantageous. But from a leadership standpoint, a toughness, I don't get that from him. I don't get that aura. So I kind of feel like he's a fine hire, right? I don't see him as an inspired choice. I don't think he's like one of the best hires I've seen. He was the last coach to be named for a reason. So I am going to put him in the why him category, okay? I mean, I guess you could say like fine if you wanted to include this category, but to me, like, I like him. I'd say I approve this decision over these two. So, like, if I were to rank it, I'd probably go like this to a certain degree, right? But I don't love Kellen Moore as a hire, okay? Next up, we've got Liam Coen. Liam Coen had some Sirianni, some Gannon in his little press conference there with the whatever he did with the do Duval or whatever he did there. He doesn't know how to say Duval correctly. He's tried multiple times. He does appear to be a little bit of a geek, but I really like his offense. I really enjoyed watching him call plays for Tampa. I thought he was low-key a wizard this past season. He was the first coordinator for them, including Canales, Leftwich the last few years, to be able to get the most out of the running game, and he made the biggest difference in that regard in terms of his ability to call plays for the run game and set up an effective run game. Now, some of that had to do with the improvement at center, improvement at running back, things like that as well. But I thought he also showcased how the offense could operate in terms of making life easy on Baker Mayfield, getting the most out of Baker, having the best Baker Mayfield season of his career. A lot of short passes, yards after catch, manufactured within the offense, which is on an offensive coordinator, in my opinion. I thought that the balance was there. The play action was there. They utilized their pieces. Chris Godwin extremely well. Mike Evans extremely well. Bucky Irving extremely well. Every single good, legit player within the offense was utilized to the best of their ability. He got a lot out of McMillan as a rookie later in the season. He got a lot out of weaker or kind of people that we thought were washed, like Sterling Shepard. You know what I mean? So he really did a great job all around in all phases of an offense. I do wonder how he operates as a head coach of a team, but he did also develop Will Levis, so that also gives him credit at the college level. And he's ran an offense in multiple locations at college, NFL for a few seasons. He was around Sean McVay in LA in terms of being around that very smart staff. We've seen good coaches come from that location. I think this is an inspired choice because I feel like other than Ben Johnson, this was the best possible offensive-minded play caller, play schemer overall that you could find. And despite the awkwardness and the dorkiness, I feel like he could work, especially in a place like Jacksonville. And I do think, even in terms of the inspired decision to get him to uplift Trevor Lawrence, that makes a lot of sense. In a neutral situation, I would also want someone like Liam Coen, being that last year, I thought that among all offensive minds, he was probably a top 5 play caller in the league, and that's a great start, okay? So Liam Coen is an inspired choice, in my opinion. Next up, who do we have? We've got Pete Carroll remaining and Mike Vrabel, okay, right? So Mike Vrabel is next. Mike Vrabel is actually a veteran coach, so I can rank him anywhere I want on this list because I've seen him coach before as an NFL coach. I've never seen Schottenheimer, Aaron Glenn, Kellen Moore, Ben Johnson, or Liam Coen. So they are technically in different categories because they're new, fresh faces that we've never seen as head coaches. Mike Vrabel and Pete Carroll we have seen as head coaches before, so I'm going to do my best to put them in spots where I feel like they best fit. Mike Vrabel, in my opinion, last time he was an NFL head coach, he was a great coach. I thought that his strength was to be able to motivate his players, get the most out of his team, and also I thought as a game clock manager, he was arguably the best in the NFL. His ability to manage the game as a coach, be able to know when to call the right timeouts, situational football, and just overall craft a 3-phase game plan that put his team in a position to win, that is where I felt like Vrabel was excellent. I think that his team plays with great grit, toughness, and energy each and every week. And he is in the mold of, the guy that's beside him right there, Mike Tomlin. I feel like he's a great leader. I feel like, Patriots fans have been calling him like Bill Parcells-esque. He's not quite Bill Belichick in terms of the creativity of his mind and the scheme, but I do feel like he might be underrated in that regard defensively, for sure. But I feel like he's more about being a leader of men and leading a 3-phase football team. I think that Mike Vrabel is a genius coach. I maybe that's bold, considering he hasn't coached. He didn't coach last year. But I felt like last time he was a coach, and you guys can go back and check, he was in my top 10, okay? I think he's an amazing coach. I think his ability to uplift men, his ability to get the most out of his team, it's just intangible. You look at his underdog record. You look at his ability to win games as an underdog, and that speaks to, I feel like, his ability to uplift his team and get the most out of his team. So that's why I have Mike Vrabel in the genius category. Pete Carroll is obviously graded on a curve because we're not talking about Pete Carroll in his peak. We're talking about what Pete Carroll is now. Okay? Like, Pete Carroll is a Hall of Fame coach in football, in my opinion. Okay? USC program. You're talking about Seattle Seahawks, building that program. Great program builder, great culture builder. And that is why he was selected to be the coach of this team. That is why you can't argue that the why him category makes sense for Pete Carroll, because the why is obvious. Why did they hire Pete Carroll? Because he's a program builder, and that's what they need in Las Vegas. They need a culture. They need an establishment, okay? They need a franchise pointed in the right direction, all right? So then you talk about, okay, is he still good as a coach? That's an interesting question, because last time we saw him, okay, Mike Macdonald pretty much had the same record. So that's interesting. That being said, McDonald's taking over for Pete's team. He has to kind of rework it and recraft it in the way that he sees it, fit. Pete, I feel like, is a more experienced coach in terms of like understanding the day-to-day, understanding game management. I feel like he's always good in that category. I've never had a problem with him in that category. I do feel like he leads his team well. He inspires his team well. He has great energy. I would say that schematically, he is probably weak, which is why he was fired, in my opinion. Like, he is getting older. He's kind of past his prime in football intelligence, right? But in terms of leadership, he is still excellent. So I would probably put Pete in fine, because I think he's not going to give you a necessary edge you need in a scheme sense, but I do feel like he will raise the floor of your football team because he is a professional and he knows what he's doing. But I don't really feel like he's the same guy he used to be. So that's why I'll put Pete Carroll there. All right, now we can get to the rest of the NFL, okay? So beyond just the coaches that were new. So let's get to the other coaches.